Hey, what's up, Light Force? Over the last couple of weeks, we've been thinking about the Bible, how to read it, and what it means. Last week, we looked at how to find verses in the Bible. We looked at how the Bible has 66 books, and each book has chapters in it, and each chapter has verses in it. So we can easily find something very, very specifically, very, very carefully, if we're looking for it. But there is a big problem. I'm going to show you some pictures, and you need to tell me what the picture is that you're looking at. Could you tell what the pictures were when we looked really close up? No, it's hard, right? And sometimes when we look at the Bible really, really close up, we forget that the Bible has a massive, big picture that it wants to tell us. Even though there are 66 books in the Bible, they're all telling one story. This is kind of like how we have Star Wars films and Avengers films and Harry Potter films, and there's lots of different films, and inside those films there's lots of different stories in. Maybe Luke's training to be a Jedi, or maybe Iron Man's building his suit. All those kinds of little stories are happening, but there is one big story that is happening. Like in Star Wars, there's the whole story about Darth Vader and Anakin. In Avengers, there's the whole thing about Thanos snapping. And all that kind of stuff. But there is small stories, and the small stories are making up one big story. And the same is true of the Bible. There are small stories like Noah and the Ark, David versus Goliath, all those kinds of small stories, and they're in the books. But there is one big story that the Bible is telling. And it's important that when we're reading the smaller stories, that we keep the big story in mind, because the big story will help us think about how we understand the small story. Now, there is one character in the Bible that is the most important person. There is one character that even if he's not mentioned by name, he's all the way through the Bible. And if we want to see the big story of the Bible, we need to think about this one person every time we read the small stories in the Bible. And that person is Jesus. Every time we read the Bible, when we're reading the small stories, we need to have in mind about this whole bigger story that is Jesus. So for example, if you're reading the story of Noah and the Ark, you might know this story. There's a flood, Noah gets all the animals in the ark, and everyone gets saved. Everyone gets saved because of one person and their obedience and what they did. When you're reading that one small story, you can have the bigger story of what Jesus did in mind. And that bigger story of Jesus can help you understand the smaller story of Noah and the ark. So why not find a grown-up and talk about how Noah and the ark is similar to what Jesus did for us, and see if you can think of any other stories in the Bible that might not be about Jesus, but if you think about Jesus in those stories, it helps us understand those stories even better. So like Noah and the ark, you could think about that one. You could think about David and Goliath. You could think about Abraham and Isaac. So find a grown-up, get them to look with you through those Bible stories, and think about how those smaller stories are telling the bigger story of Jesus. I'm going to put a link to a video below, and this video explains the big story of the Bible way better than I could do. And the guy who's talking about it is way cooler than me. He's got things flying out the screen at you and doing stuff I can't do. So if you go watch that video below, you will see the big story of the Bible, and how all those smaller stories and all those smaller books of the Bible make up one big story. So I suggest checking that out after you have checked out Shirley's favourite Bible story that is coming up now. See you next week.
Hello, I'm Shirley. My favorite Bible story, or one of my favorite, would be the story of Moses, who was born to the family of Amram and Jochebed in the land of Egypt at a time where the Israelites were slaves in the land of Egypt. Why I like the story of Moses, because it illustrates God's grace and great leadership. I say God's grace because at the time when Moses was called by the Lord to go to the land of Egypt to lead out the children of Israel into his promised land, Moses didn't feel like he had the ability or the capacity, or he didn't feel he was equipped enough to carry out that task. To him, that task was huge, and he didn't see himself as qualified for the assignment. But the Lord assured him and gave him the grace and empowered him to actually go and perform the task. So it just shows the Lord's grace and how he can use us even in our weaknesses, even when we are not confident. The Lord is able to use us and meet us wherever we are. And when he did trust in the Lord, he did show great leadership skills by being patient, even when the children of Israel were complaining throughout the journey. At some point, there were turbulences, there were trials, there were challenges. He never was discouraged. He never just turned around and said, okay, I'm done. I'm not going along with this assignment. He was encouraged. He did encourage them. He was able to guide them. He was able to keep a clear focus and a clear vision, regardless of the noise that were around him and all the challenges that he saw. He trusted in the Lord and was able to lead the children of Israel into the promised land. So those were the attributes that really made me like the story. Thank you.